Good morning, ladies and gentlemen. We're pleased to continue Odessa International Film Festival. We're still online. We're going to be online till 3rd of October. And today we're about to launch one of the most important and the most interesting programs for the film professional, the Film Industry Office program. And traditionally, for a couple of years already, in the framework of the Film Industry Office, we have an additional program that is called Cinema Backstage. The program that is dedicated to the most relevant trends in film industry, and this year is also going to be an example of that. So we prepared this program very thoroughly, and there's going to be 3 important events that are ahead of you. And before I introduce you, the moderator and the curator of the Cinema Backstage program, I would like to say that basically we would like to ask you to keep on following all of the presentations of the film projects at different production stage. There has been a lot of different projects and a lot of different authors that have been united together. So please follow the round tables and panel discussions that we have and so on and so forth. So basically, I'm really happy to introduce you with a film expert, the friend of the film festival and the consultant of the film festival, Tamara Tatishvili. So we're going to spend the whole day today with her. Дякую, Юлія. Ми дещо почали трошки з української мови.
Which is always very nice, because now, especially in this year, we have to sit mostly still in one place and travel to different areas. So it is my pleasure to be with you, to be with the Odessa Film Festival once again, and to share this rather unusual experience of transforming from offline edition to online. But as anything else in life, this has also brought some of the very interesting experiences and the curves. And I'm sure that together we will be stronger in the future. And this said, I would like to officially open the Cinema Backstage conference, which is a little bit different this year in comparison to the previous 2 editions, and is structured in the 3 different panels, echoing 3 different subjects, which we think is very important for the professionals in Ukraine, in the region, but also internationally. And now I would like to give a very, very warm welcome to the first 3 panelists of the talk that will concentrate about the Council of Europe Cultural Film Fund Eurimages, and the fact, a rather happy fact, that finally Ukraine is a member to the fund. So together with me on the panel today will be Sergio, who represents the fund of Eurimages. It will be a very, very dear colleague and a friend, Iole, who is from Italy. She works from Ministry of Cultural Heritage, Activities and Tourism, and is also the national representative of Italy to Eurimages. And finally, someone who just took a very important post, probably in the most uncertain period one could imagine for observing something that is that international like Eurimages is also a good friend and a very good colleague, Vladimir Yatzenko, a rather known producer in Ukraine, who is now also taking up the task of being an Ukrainian representative to the fund. So together we will have a rather informal conversation about the current state of the fund, and we'll explain to our viewers, our online audience, where does the fund stand today. There's a lot happening also about the future, so we may want to touch base that a little bit. And then we will hear more from Vladimir, what are his plans and ambitions and feelings about this new task. I will spare him a couple of moments because I think he is the most recent to this whole conversation somehow. And I would like to start the conversation with Sergio and maybe ask you very briefly to recap on the main mission of Eurimages, not only production, but all the other support mechanisms that it offers. It's not a secret for many people here online that it is a fund that is very close to my heart and my professional life. For 9 years, I also acted as the representative of Georgia to the fund, And I do believe, without making it a flattering experience, that it is a very important mechanism to support a true collaboration, the real artistic collaboration in European cinema. And I do believe that this is the fund that is always at the front of this mission, that it exists from year 89, if I'm not wrong, and already has 39 members alongside the 2 associate ones. So in a nutshell for you, Sergio, what does Eurimages stand for, and what are the key elements that it supports?
Hello? Can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes. Hello, Tamara. Sorry, but I lost the end of your speech. Tamara?
Sergio, yes? Maybe
Yes.
you can
Now.
talk a bit loud.
Yes. So, well, my name is Sergio Garcia, and I'm a project manager at Eurimages. Can you hear me? Yes. Okay, well, first of all, thank you, Tamara. Thank you to the Odessa Film Festival for having us here in this really interesting roundtable. It's indeed challenging times, but quite interesting at the same time. And we're very happy to have Ukraine having joined the Eurimages family.
Thank you.
So let me explain a bit the history of Eurimages for those who may not be so familiar with the fund. Eurimages is, first of all, a cultural fund. It's also a supranational fund. And Eurimages was created in the late 80s. It was launched in 1989. And at that time, the European film industry was really fragmented. In most of the countries, there was, on one hand, a big market share of Hollywood, of American films. And then on the other hand, there was the national films, the national industry. But there was unfortunately a lack of cooperation between the different countries in Europe. So this led to a scarcity of international co-productions. And this was one of the reasons why Eurimages was created. So Eurimages started with the goal of supporting the European film industry. Now it goes beyond Europe, because we have member countries that are not from Europe, such as Argentina and Canada, who have joined the fund. And the objective was to encourage cooperation across borders. And this was done specifically through the promotion of the concept of international co-production. And I think that after 30 years now, we can say that Eurimages has contributed substantially, and we think that the situation in Europe is in a much stronger position now.
Thank you very much, Sergio. And could you please tell us if there are like cultural but also economic aspects in the support that Eurimages gives out, and what is the core condition? Not mentioning like every line of it, but what is at the heart of the Eurimages funding support as a value added?
Well, you are asking several questions, so I'll try to get to cover all the questions that you are asking. On one hand, talking about the financial situation, condition of the fund. Well, Eurimages has 41 member countries. I will later perhaps get into detail about which countries are part of the fund. It has an annual budget of 26 million euro, and it has different program schemes. The core business of Eurimages, so to say, the essence is the co-production fund, to which it's dedicated. 90% of the resources of the fund are dedicated to the co-production. And the co-production program is a program to support international co-productions between at least 2 member states of the fund. And it can be either animations, documentaries, or fiction films intended for theatrical release. So Eurimages is a film fund. And with a support to each film of a maximum of 500,000 euro. So this is in terms of financing. Culturally, Eurimages has, we don't like to say that Eurimages has a specific editorial line, but as I said, Eurimages is a cultural fund. So its priority is to support films that are auteur-driven, films that are pushing boundaries, films that are trying to steal in the market. And it has a cultural approach. It doesn't mean that it does not support films that can be commercially viable, but the priority is not the commercial success of a film, but, as I said, the art house, the auteur-driven, the innovation of the different themes. Having said this, Eurimages supports between 80, 90 films per year. So if you take a look at the catalog of films that have been supported by Eurimages in the previous years, you can see that there is a great variety of films, from very small projects to big budget films. So it supports, it's a very, very eclectic film fund.
Could you maybe, before I move to Iole to look at the fund from a bit of a different perspective, could you maybe very briefly outline the promotional activity and the support of distribution support scheme that Eurimages also offers still, if I'm not wrong, or at least used to offer for sure?
Yes, as I was mentioning, the core business of Eurimages is the co-production program, but Eurimages has also other very important programs as part of the fund. One of them, as you are mentioning, is the promotion program. The promotion program is a program that started to give visibility to the fund, and it has different initiatives. The main two initiatives are, on one hand, the development, the co-production development awards, and this is a partnership that Eurimages started several years ago with different film festivals, with its co-production market, basically with the idea to give an award of 20,000 euro to projects that are in development and that have been selected to the co-production markets of the festivals that we are collaborating with, in order to promote international cooperation from the very beginning, from the early development stage of the project. So we have now a cooperation with 10 co-production markets, Rotterdam, Berlin, Sarajevo, San Sebastian, among others. And actually, this is a program that, as from next year, we launched a call for tender to make a process of renewal of the co-production markets that we are going to collaborate with, and very soon we will be able to announce the co-production markets that have been selected for the next 3 years. So this is one of the activities. Another activity of the promotion working program is the Lab Awards. The Lab Awards is also a collaboration with 4 work-in-progress events linked to film festivals, Thessaloniki, Les Arcs, Carlo Vivari, and Hagesund. And this is aimed to support projects that are really experimental, both from the production or the artistic or the dramaturgical point of view. So these are the kind of projects that are either guerrilla made, that have a really complicated time to apply to the national funds, or that are not official co-productions. And the idea is that we don't want to leave these projects out of the support. We want to encourage to have this project made, and that's the intention of the Work in Progress Eurimages Lab Project Award, which consists of 50,000 euro for the project, for a project that is already work in progress, and it should help to complete the project. This is a program that is now, after 5 years, under review. So we have launched a study, and during the next month, we will evaluate how to evolve the program. In 2021, next year, there will be a standby, a one-year hiatus, but then in 2022, we will launch it back, and we will see how it will, what form, what shape it will take. And as for the distribution program, as you were mentioning, this is a program intended to support distribution of films for countries that are not covered through the Creative Europe umbrella. This has now been put on standby as well, as from March this year, and also there is an external evaluation being carried to see what shape it should take as from next year.
Some of your very interesting and sharp coverings brought me good memories of our joint collaborations back in time when the lab project, for instance, was having a burst, so to say, and now it already is the time for rethinking it. I think it means that there is a strive, there is this will in Eurimages, both on the level of the board of management and the secretariat, to really constantly move forward and challenge somehow yourself to see how relevant the support mechanisms are. And I think that's a very good thing that can happen to an institution. So at a bit of a later stage, I will come back to you, Sergio, asking a question about the future. And I would also like to remind all the viewers that in case you have questions to ask, you may leave it in the comment bar, I think, on the interface where you're watching our talk, and I will voice as much as possible from the questions that might emerge towards the end of our conversation. And now I would like to move to Iole, a very dear colleague from Italy, and I think there's a lot of meaning to the country you represent, Iole, in 2020. Somehow in the beginning of this year, we were all devastated seeing what was happening in Italy for the reasons that we all know. And for me, it's been also very symbolic and somehow rather important for our creative industry to see that it was again in Italy with Venice Film Festival that our industry started to go back. I don't want to use a word of normality or not, but something very essential that is a true standing together and a collaboration, watching films that Eurimages supports, for instance, on a big screen, sharing our experiences, and reviving probably the future of our industry. And I would like to ask you to first maybe tell our audiences what is the main role of the national representative in Eurimages, you as the member of the board. And Vladimir will hear some of the tips in this, I'm sure. And then maybe we can reflect about the additional value added, beyond the actual mission.
Sorry.
Since I had some issues. Can you hear me?
Yeah, now yes.
Yeah, it's all good. Yeah.
Thank you. Thank you really for having me here. Thank you to the Odessa International Film Festival. It's such a pleasure for me to at least having the possibility to welcome the new friends and colleagues from Ukraine in Eurimages. I'm sorry we cannot do it in person, but it will come sooner or later. Because Eurimages is indeed a big family, and I'm sorry you cannot enjoy this part of it yet. Because I arrived there, it was, I think, 6 years ago now. And I have to say, I was a bit scared of having to deal with all these countries, people that were also experienced, and in a fund that is very complex in all its activities. And I was very warmly welcomed, and every other national representative for me was a guide. So I had plenty of guidance, I have to say. including, of course, the Secretariat. I don't hear anything anymore. Do you still hear me?
Yes.
Yes, sorry, sometimes my audio goes off.
Yeah.
Okay, so what I've learned throughout these years, I have to owe it to my colleagues there, and I have to say it's quite a complex job we have to do as national representatives, because on one side we have to follow our own projects, our own producers in their journey, in the request of the Eurimages Fund, which means to be close to them from before they even apply to the fund, trying also sometimes, I have to say, to correct some prejudices they have on how the fund works. I very often, my producers, at least, they believe decisions are based on political grounds, no, a country rather than another, whereas instead the decisions are purely made on the quality assessment of the project. And I had to understand exactly some tricks of how it worked, because also quite often I have my producers asking me which would be strategically the best session, you know, to request funding, which is the one in which there's less competition, maybe less project competing. First of all, we cannot say, but apart from that, I have one answer for this, which is the moment in which the project is at its maturity, it's ready. It's because Eurimages has to come last, in theory at least. So it is important that the whole dossier is very well prepared, that the whole package shows that the film is ready on an artistic and on a productive level. And the Eurimages Fund is helping to close the financing in order then to go into shooting. This is a very important part of the preparation of the dossier, because I think the competition lies there. There's no competition among countries. It's just a competition among the best co-productions from the European, and now not even European, from, let's say, all the countries that now have joined the fund. So it's a tough competition, but it's also a beautiful job for us, because we get to read, follow, and know projects of high quality coming from very different countries, from very different film industries, which is also for me an important experience as a professional, because I've learned so much from other countries' systems, from other countries' cinematographies. And I also have to say the way the Eurimages Fund works is also become a true benchmark for us as a national film fund. There was something Sergio already introduced in this very well done overview of how the fund works, which I think is probably a peculiarity of Eurimages. I don't think that is as much recurrent in every other national or supranational film fund, that Eurimages is constantly self-assessing itself. It's constantly self-interrogating its members, and here is where our role as national representative to how the fund works, because the industry is changing at a very fast rate. And we need to be flexible, adapt, reconsider our functioning, our practices. And of course, now we're doing big time with the reform of the fund, but this is not just once every 5 years. We always have these study groups ongoing in which each board member can fully contribute to adjust every part of the regulations, but also, and this at a higher level as a board member, as the mission of Eurimages. Yes, it is very clear that it is a cultural fund, but also knowing on a philosophical way what a cultural fund is constantly under reflection. Because the industry is changing, because we have new players, because creativity somehow is adapting to the new ways of consumption, and we have to bear this in mind in our policies.
Yes, Iole, it's a fabulous recapping on like the complexity of the role. I dare reflecting on it as well, because coming from a smaller country, also I have a very strong memory of the emotional side when I finally, after quite some time, negotiated Georgia's accession to Eurimages. And when I first went there to a session in Paris, I must say, which used to be known as one of the most complicated sessions logistically. And I felt, oh my God, okay, so what am I doing now after Georgia is the member state? And exactly as you said, slowly but very surely, I started to understand that there are many prejudices around the roles and the missions and the funds, but basically it's a bunch of professionals that are very open, that can guide you. Of course, there is a competition, that's life, but at the end of the day, artistic the real artistic value wins. And I think there are a lot of films with the label of Eurimages that are proof to it. It does not mean that yourself and myself and Vladimir in the future did not experience the bad feeling of a failure where our project is not supported, but that's the two hands of any funding scheme. And I think it needs to be an art of the new representative as well, to understand that sometimes you need to communicate a negative decision as well, and maybe help to understand producers what was the real reason behind it. And Iole and I used to have conversations about that back in a time, and I think that is also an equally important role that a national representative could play, to make national producers understand what has to be done in a better way, be it on an artistic level or as evaluating the package itself. So my next question to you, Iole, would be another reflection that I have about the additional value added that Eurimages support brings. It, of course, is very important financially. It's a gap financier, and every penny matters in European cinema, be it a co-production between big countries, small countries, or all of them together. But I felt, and I'm not sure if it's me as a Georgian professional, or it's also is something that you could feel, that apart from the aid, apart from the financial investment, there is also this additional value added that the Eurimages logo brings to the project. Something that is the mark of equality. Would you agree to that? Do you have those considerations in your territory or on within the European context?
Absolutely, Tamara. It's Eurimages is definitely a quality label. Everyone knows how tough it is to get Eurimages support, but even just to be eligible to Eurimages, and I don't mean going to the end of the project and get supported, but being eligible in the first place, meaning you have to have already a co-producing structure that is solid enough, that already in place, that probably you already have on board the selective national film fund, possibly on all sides. I mean, it's already a big filter. So what I try to explain to my producers, if you don't get Eurimages, don't be too cross. Of course, it's a problem, but already being there in the selection is something, and it's difficult because the money are never enough for everyone. So for those who have the luck, but also, of course, the merit of getting the Eurimages support, it means way more than the money itself. I have seen many times projects after getting this support, because of the Eurimages label attached to it, getting other forms of maybe local support in my country, getting the distributors more interested, the international distributors more interested. And if they were already on board before the Eurimages support, then it's the festivals that somehow, Eurimages is shedding a light on projects that are really worth watching. And in a way, I think festivals, the major film festivals in Europe, look at Eurimages somehow as a pre-selection, that it's ready for them. I've had many conversations, particularly with first-timers who wanted to submit to Eurimages, which, by the way, Eurimages welcomes very easily. I have to say, in my personal experience, I've been luckier with first-timers than with established directors, probably also because of the amount of support they were requesting. But apart from that, they came to me also a bit, let's say, excited to be speaking to somebody representing Eurimages, because for them Eurimages is that brand, that logo they see on the big screen while at A-list film festivals premieres. That's why they see in it. So it obviously helps the project at different levels, and knowing how difficult it is to get it, it's clearly a quality stamp you have on the project before it even starts shooting.
Indeed, yeah, I totally agree. And I say my opinions also to echo a little bit the future steps that Ukraine will probably need to take in one way or another. Its support to the films that's been a co-production with Georgia has been very, very helpful in the promotion strategies of those films on a later stage. And in my former function, I had to be present a little bit on the both sides, and really from a very practical and personal experience, I realized that, of course, direct support is very important for production, for producers and the whole team, but there is this extra value which is no less essential, and that the both of them are somehow a little bit in the first hands of the national representative as well, to be working with the producer, with the director, delegate producer, as we used to call, and see what are the best ways of presenting the project, and whether the content of the project is ready for a tough competition that is ahead of any co-production in any session of Eurimages, be it one with most of the applications or not. And now I look at you, Vladimir. You obviously been very lucky, because after many years of trying to access the fund, finally Ukraine made it, and it made it in the year of 2020, when basically everything, not only in our industry, but probably across all other industries that exist, goes to the dystopian question and then starts to revive itself. I've got to know that you observed for the moment one session of Eurimages online. Mm-hmm. Of course, it would be helpful, but it's not close to an experience you would have, as Iole mentioned, if you would be physically traveling and seeing this very active, very strong, creative and industry-based discussions offline. But you probably got some sort of a feeling already there. And if I'm not wrong, it is the next session of Eurimages where you are now actively participating, and projects with Ukrainian participation are eligible. So let me congratulate you on this role. I think this is a very important role that you have taken. We've spoken about it many times, and I know that you are cautious and full of attention to make the best out of it. But tell us a little bit about the Ukrainian film industry today, because you are the producer, you're out there on the field, and you've scoped the best prize of the Odessa Film Festival last year for Homeward, for instance. You know, you can make your hands dirty with the production, so to say. And now you are looking on a completely different angle of how the projects are supported. So tell us a little bit if you feel that Ukraine is really ready to provide strong content, and how has it been for you in the beginning?
Okay, thank you very much, Tamara, and thank you for having me here. I'm really happy that Ukraine finally became a member of Eurimages. And actually, it's we can't find the best time to join Eurimages for sure. Yes, because we have the economic crisis, COVID, political turbulence, reform of the Eurimages itself, and so it's a definitely right time. But that's okay because I should say that changing is our second name, and everything is changing in Ukraine all the time. So all the producers and all the film industry is quite know how to work in these circumstances. And you're right, we were observers for one of the sessions, and I was quite impressed with the level of the honestly, straightforwardly, and so on, how people discuss the project, which kind of questions they ask. And it was very deep professional discussion. And it was I was really pleased to watch it, and don't participate in it, but at least watch it. And of course now I know more or less to which kind of conversation I have to be prepared. Because you're right, this session, it's Ukrainian debut on the stage, and we have several projects which we have to present to the board of Eurimages, and we'll see what's happened. And basically it's quite interesting because at the same time Ukrainian industry now in the kind of like reform situation, because we now try to reform in the we have the first stage when we have the a lot of newcomers, everyone can join and shoot and do something, and the money was spreading all around. And it was done for purpose because we tried to build the first stage of the industry where different people can make some mistakes, and then we need to understand who is doing what. I mean, who is doing like great job, very professional, who is doing something different. And this is the second stage is coming, and we now discuss a lot in professional society and which kind of rules we have to implement to have the open industry from one side, but from the other side to have any kind of professional feedback on the results what we are doing. From the other side, we have the very shrinking local market, and I don't know how much screens will survive after the COVID, but we don't have that much even before. I mean, of course, it's partially was the war on the east. We'll lose a lot of cinemas. We'll lose a lot of cinemas in Crimea. But generally, I believe we have around 600 screens before the COVID pandemic. And I don't even want to make any kind of assumptions what we'll have at the end, which drive us to the situation that we have to really fight for the international markets. And of course, we need to provide the high quality content which should be able to be spreading around in the at least European markets. And if we talk about statistics, for example, for this third session in which we will, I hope, participate, we got 13 requests from the producers, and from this 13 requests, it was only 5 which we can count as the more or less prepared projects. And the rest was totally crap. I'm sorry. I mean, sometimes it was just people who said, okay, when I can take my money, I mean, I don't have script, I don't have nothing, but I want to get some money. But at the end of the day, we now have 3 projects in Eurimages. We'll see what's happened. And all of them more or less okay in the way, but of course, because we are rookies, we are newcomers, I don't know how that's gonna be. And of course, I pitched the project from the other side many times, on Berlinale co-production market or any other pitching forums, and this is completely different, as I understand, of course. But I'm really waiting for this new role to understand how is that working. And of course, I'm really hope that the other representatives also tell me a little bit more about how that should work, because I was really greatly welcomed from the Roberta Ola side, but of course I don't have that much conversation with all the representatives because we don't see anyone in person. But I hope it's gonna change maybe till the end of the year.
Yes, we all hope that we will go to some of the proper operations in our functions across all the programs in this industry. You now have Iole, as you probably have heard already, a very, very open and really knowledgeable colleague for you to, I'm sure she will be open if you could drop her an email and ask something. And there are many others, Vladimir, who can do that. To be honest, my personal view is that Ukraine has a very strong chances in providing interesting content and news stories, and I think this is very important to any funder, inclusive of Eurimages. And because I've been also working within Ukraine for some years now in different functions, before you joined, you have had already been co-producing quite a lot. And because of the geopolitical issues that you mentioned, same as Georgia a while ago, you have to make an extra effort to go international, be more open, and really push in a soft or a strong way to make other peers understand what's happening creatively in Ukraine. And I'm sure that you will use this mechanism wisely to make promotion even of Ukrainian content more international. Sure. So best of luck for your defending strategies. It really is this connotation of the first time a little bit, but everyone that is your colleague has had it, and we all survived in one way or another. So I'm sure that you will be embraced with a lot of curiosity. On the other hand, we are starting to have questions coming, which are different, and all four of us could reply to them in one way or another. But before I start reading the questions, let me go back to Sergio and ask him to tell us a little bit more about the future of Eurimages. Myself, Iole, and you, we know there's been a process cooking for quite some while within Eurimages. Iole said it very well, the importance of self-reflection and a bit like of a self-audit, if you like, about the relevance of the funding when the industry is constantly evolving and changing. And there's been already a couple of public articles, for instance, the recent one in Screen, when the managing director of Eurimages talked about the reform of the institution and a couple of things that we should expect. So could you tell our Ukrainian fellows about it, Sergio, and a bit of a timeline? When is it happening?
Hey, Tamara. Well, as you and Iole were mentioning, I think that one of the big assets of Eurimages as a film fund is its ability to adapt to the changes of this ever changing industry that is the audiovisual industry. As Iole was mentioning before, Eurimages has not only has constantly Hello?
Yes.
Can you? Yes. Okay. Perfect. I lost you for a second. So every year, Eurimages changes somehow its regulation to facilitate life to producers. Eurimages is constantly having internal study groups to discuss what kind of programs should evolve and how. And every 5 years, Eurimages conducts an external evaluation to look into the bigger picture. Usually, this external evaluation is done in terms of the management of the fund, the performance, and this leads to major changes. But 2 years ago, in 2018, this external evaluation, which was conducted by Ernst & Young, also included the governance. And there was an issue of the governance because Eurimages started, as I mentioned, it's already 31 years old. We are already 31 years old. And when Eurimages started, there were only 12 member countries. And now there are 41 member countries. And obviously the decision-making process for the board of management for all the countries is not the same when you're 12. You can have a direct conversation than when you are 41. When it gets to so many members, things can be complicated. So in terms of governance, basically, there was the outcome of the external audits that recommended different changes to be made. There has been a working group that has been discussing for a long time and still is. And recently, we were very excited to finally learn that the Committee of Ministers of the Council of Europe had approved the reform. So the reform is going to be implemented. And this is something that we can already, as you were mentioning, publicize. It's not clear yet when it will start to be implemented. It could be either in the second semester of 2021 or at the beginning of 2022, and it will lead to very significant changes. On one hand, on the changes, more practical changes that don't have to do with the governance, because there are also changes in terms of the management aspects, and this affect producers. One significant change is that as from next year, producers that request for their projects support up to 150,000 euro, this kind of support will be a direct support. So it will be a subsidy that is not reimbursable, and it's not linked to the reimbursement linked to revenues of the film. Let me explain very briefly how the fund works so far. So far, the support that Eurimages grants to films takes the form of a loan in very favorable conditions, because it's a loan at a zero rate interest, and that it needs to be reimbursed only when a project has net revenues. And from there, a percentage has to be reimbursed. Now we are trying to simplify the process, and for those smaller projects who request a smaller amount, up to 150,000 euro, it will be a direct subsidy. So I think that this will make life easier for producers of smaller projects. On the other hand, we are also evolving in the way cash flowing, in the way payments of the support is being made. Up to now, there are three payments of 60% the first payment, then 20%, then 20%. And now we're going to simplify this as well, and there will be two payments. So the first payment will be 70% once we sign the Eurimages agreement and shooting starts, and then the remainder, the 30%, will be in a second payment that will be disclosed once the project has been completed, theatrically released, and the cost audited. So I think that will also be a significant improvement for producers, because they will have more favorable terms in terms of cash flowing the Eurimages support. Now, in terms of the governance, there are also going to be significant changes. One major change is that the decisions, the evaluation of projects that is going to be conducted by independent external experts, and not by the national representatives who are now working in what we call the co-production working groups. So these external experts will be people from the industry. It will be open. There will be an open call for everyone who is willing to apply. They will be paid for their work, and they will do analysis of the films, and they will do the recommendations for the board of management to be approved. So this will be a major change, and this is actually in the process of being decided how this is exactly going to work. So this is a major change that is going to make things very, very different. And then in addition to this, there will be the creation of an executive committee to represent, since I was mentioning, the board of management is composed of the representatives of the 41 member countries, and it will it has and it will continue to determine the policy of the fund, so to say, to decide the guidelines of how and when the fund should continue. But for the day-to-day decisions, for the quicker decisions, there will be an executive committee that will take those decisions, and then it will be the secretariat who is working on the day-to-day management of the fund, the instrument to apply those measures. So, as I said, this is also going to be a significant change in terms of the governance of the fund. So we are very excited to see all these changes happening. In the middle, it has caught us in the middle of yet another major disruption in the film industry and in the whole world, which is the COVID situation. And as Vladimir was mentioning, this has led to changes in the way that we meet, that the board of management meetings take place. It caught us, the first board of management meeting that was impacted was precisely in March, was due to be in the second half of March, and this was just when the confinement took place in many European countries, so this had to be cancelled. And once again, Eurimages had to adapt. We delayed the board and the decisions a bit, but in the end we were successful. And when we had to do them online in May, the second board of management meeting, which was due to take place in June, was effectively done in June, although again online. And now we are in the middle of the third board of management meeting that will take place in October, in mid-October, and will also take place online. But we are evolving, and this time it will be, I think, even if it's online, we will have a much better a much better conversation between all the countries.
Thank you very much, Sergio. This is, I've been seeing here on the screen, Iole having a smile on her face as well, like recapping on what a significant importance this whole reform has and how quite significantly it's going to change not only the operations, but also how things are perceived probably in the future. And just to maybe reflect on two elements, one that is the support towards the lower budgets, so to say, becoming an aid. I think that's a very important and rather pragmatic move, especially towards maybe even towards the territories that are co-producing on rather infringed budgets, so to say, and these are smaller territories in many cases. And on the other hand, the way of evaluating projects when you are going to bring in industry professionals from across different countries, I think this will also bring in more voices, more diversity probably, and interesting debate on the content that will be supported. So let me ask you two very practical questions. Whenever this happens, does it mean that someone from Ukraine as a professional who qualifies with the conditions to be an evaluator could also be one of those professionals debating the project?
It will be open to all industry professionals. There will be different. The idea is still taking shape, but certainly it will be open to film professionals from all the Eurimages member countries. So certainly Ukrainian film professionals are also welcome to apply.
Okay, and my other technical question is related to something you mentioned earlier. This is the collaboration of Eurimages with the co-production markets. And someone from the audience also asked these questions once again asked the question, how does Eurimages collaborate with festivals and whether this collaboration going to go on notwithstanding the COVID-19 situation. So my question is, does a festival from Ukraine, or a co-production platform to be more precise, from Ukraine, in the future, theoretically, if applying, could be selected as one of the platforms that gives out the award that you mentioned.
Yes, once again, absolutely. This is obviously one of the benefits of being part of Eurimages. Ukrainian festivals and Ukrainian festivals can apply to both to any of the initiatives of Eurimages. So in the case of the Co-production Development Awards, now unfortunately, it would be too late because the call for tender was launched and it has been closed. Now we are determining and evaluating which festivals will be in the roster as from next year, and this will last for the next 3 years. So from 2021 to 2023, we will launch a new call for tender in 2023. So at that moment it will be accessible. And on the other hand, regarding the lab awards, as I was mentioning, now there is a hiatus probably of next year, 2021, but the intention is to launch a call for tender for the lab awards. We don't know yet what will be the shape that it will take, but the intention is to launch a call for tender sometime during the spring of 2021, and there, of course, Ukrainian festivals markets would be welcome to apply to this initiative.
So very good to know from Vladimir, I suppose, to have his industry consultations at a later stage. And there is one other, I mean, we have quite some questions. So one other question, and maybe Iole, you are best fit to reply to that, is a colleague is asking if you think that Ukraine has to consider anything story-wise to apply to Eurimages. Is there some kind of an artistic line or these special stories that Ukrainians need to consider? So it's also linked a little bit to a bit of some of the stereotyping that exists probably around the funding world. So I think you could reply to this question. Do you, as an Italian representative to Eurimages, expect some special story from Ukraine to be read?
Well, I wish I knew the reply to this question, because I would give it as a tip to all my producers and we will get Eurimages all the time. Unfortunately, it's not that easy, and there's not one story or one genre that Eurimages privileges more than the other, except for the general let's say, principle of quality, whose meaning, though, is very personal, as you know. So, of course, I think we expect stories to have, it's not just a matter of content, but it's also a matter of language, clearly. So a script that is very well developed, that has possibly been developed also through workshops, markets, of course, gets a richness that it then shows in the end to the Eurimages committee that decides who to support or not. And one thing I've understood by working in Eurimages for these past years is that what is mostly important is artistically is that all the dossier is very well done, not only script-wise, but also in all the other materials, the note by the director, the description of the characters, the mood board, if you have some images to show, just to give a sense as close as possible to what we will see on the screen. Because, and this is not just Eurimages problem, I think all national funding are dealing with the difficulty of deciding whether to support a project that it's on paper, while a film obviously has nothing to do with the words that are written there, because we know how much a script can evolve and change. So the better you can express the overall work that will appear on screen, that is also that is a visual language, that is a style, that is a pace, that is a voice, the better. I don't think we expect particular content coming from one country rather than another. I have to say, in my personal experience, having to be, when I have my projects and having to defend them in front of the board, I think the best contribution I can give to the projects is when there is some cultural specificity I need to explain, because it is true. I find it so funny, for instance, with comedies, because humor, for instance, is something that differs so much from country to country, from culture to culture. And I realized how peculiar the humor, the kind of humor we have in Italy, how it differs from other countries, because there's always some level of bitterness that sometimes is not fully understood by other countries. So this is just as an example, but obviously the better the project talks to different cultures and countries, the most possibilities of circulating it has, and it shows the quality and the thought that has been given in the drafting of the dossier. And this is also why it is always very important for me to give feedback to my producers of the reactions I've had during the discussion, because they're so, as Vladimir said, I mean, our colleagues are, Tamara was one of the one I admired the most, I have to say, when she was with us. The comments are so not only technically good, but they put so much passion in what they're doing, and you can always feel their personal sensitivity and their personal life experience in what they're seeing in the project, which makes our discussions, I think, definitely exciting, but also a learning experience for all of us.
Thank you, Iole. I think there's been a lot in your reply also to transform into the practical work that Vladimir is about to take or has started already, probably. More of this kind of questions will be coming, because on the way you will be receiving the support for the project, but you will be also rejected some of the applications. And I think that is when the real work between the national representative and the producers start, and it takes time and it needs a shape, and I think it's a very interesting role, so that is ahead. Now there is a question which I would maybe split between Sergio and Vladimir, because the question is general, and it says, do you think how prepared Ukrainian projects are to get financing from Eurimages in comparison to the proposals from the other countries? And of course, there's no single-sided reply to that, but I think this question somehow echoes the competition level, and whether it is about the countries really, or it's about the content that is provided in a form of a co-production. So Sergio, maybe briefly outline your opinion on that, and then we move to Vladimir to tell us if he thinks that Ukraine is ready.
Yes, because thank you, Tamara. That's a question that will be seen in the next sessions. But I think I'm pretty positive that Ukrainian producers are ready, and that they will learn very quickly what are the essential things to submit with an application. Iole has already covered a bit partially this question. I mean, what is important for producers when apply to a project is to, first of all, to apply at the right moment. There are 4 sessions every year, so I think that gives enough flexibility for a producer to decide when to apply. You need to meet minimum criteria of eligibility, because Eurimages, as Iole was also mentioning, works as a top financier, so producers are expected to have already most of the financing in place when they apply to Eurimages. But at least they need to have 50% of the financing confirmed in every co-producing country. So basically, the projects that we expect to come to Eurimages are projects that are at the very late stage of pre-production, and in some cases, they may even have started shooting. And this is especially true for documentaries, where we have a flexibility of allowing of up to 80% of the shooting taking place before the decision is made. So, as such, we expect that projects have, at the point when they apply, a very solid financing plan, a very solid co-production structure, where ideally there is a strong cooperation between the co-producing countries. And I always tend to say that it's not a quantitative issue, but a qualitative issue. So there is really not a relevance of having more countries adding to the co-production structure. I always recommend producers to submit the project as a co-production, as an organic co-production, and not to add necessarily more countries for thinking that this will increase the chances of being supported. No, that's not the case, and sometimes it may even harm the project. So I would suggest that you can participate and submit a project as a bilateral co-production or as a multilateral, but the important thing is that there is a real collaboration between the co-producers and that the financing in each country is solid. This is in terms of the financial aspect of the project, but in terms of the artistic elements of the project, again, you should submit with a script that you think that is at a very late stage, so a last version of the script. And what I always emphasize as well is that it is very important to, I realize that this may be expensive, but to spend an extra money in having a good translation.
Yeah.
Because the materials will be read by most of the members in English or in French, for those materials that need to be submitted in French, and not, unfortunately, in the original language, because many members will not speak the original language. So the translation, the English and the French translations are essential, and especially for the script. It's not only a translation that is understandable, but also a translation that catches the dialogue. And this is especially true, for example, for comedies that always are complicated to translate, but especially if the translations are not so the translations are essential. And then, of course, all the other artistic materials are essential as well. So audiovisual materials, mood boards, anything that you have already ready for the project or that you can manage to prepare for the project. And also, another tip is that no matter how relevant a topic or an actor or an actress or a crew member may seem to be at national level, you also have to think that this is a fund with 41 member countries, and in other countries, elements that you think that are fully understandable may not be so understood or known outside. So I would always emphasize, if you have an actress that is very relevant in your country, to explain this, because perhaps the members who are reading the project may not be familiar with her. And the same applies to any other.
Thank you, Sergio.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. And now, as I'm in no position with Eurimages anymore, I let myself be very honest and say to our dear Ukrainian producers and directors, not just a good translation. If you don't want to lose the momentum and the reader and annoy a very busy board member who tries to identify the best of best in the competition that is always very tough, really invest strongly into having a good translation done by a person who's been familiar with the script writing and not just some sort of translations that exist in the world. We had some moments of shame back in a time. Luckily, then Georgia picked up on it, but just don't repeat the mistakes of others, as it is said, and try to put it as a strong line in the budget when time comes. And you, Vladimir, briefly, do you think you have a lot to offer? Do you think ready to come up with the stories internationally?
So basically, regarding the previous question a little bit, basically generally we have some very important thing which influence on the quality of the project with which Ukraine applied to Eurimages, and this is super easy because it's super uncertain, which we feel in Ukrainian life, because in Ukraine you should live very long and shoot very fast. And this is because everything can change. Your national currency can drop 2 times or 3 times in 1 year. I mean, it's happened several years ago. So I mean that, of course, all the producers feel this pressure and then trying to push as much as they can to shoot as fast as they can, which sometimes drive us to the situation that we apply with with the project which not really ready for it. And from the other side, you're right with the translation. It's one of the biggest problem, because very limited quantity of people apply with the project which pass through the professional translators. But from the other side of this problem, we still don't have any kind of support for development. Only now we plan to do it, which means that in Ukraine it's quite complicated, especially if you have several projects in development, to pay quite a lot of money for professional, very good, like native reader, native speaker. And this is still kind of like issue which we try to solve. From the other point of view, of course, everyone tried to push a lot of the project which connect with the thing which producers think would be popular in the Europe. I mean, like we still talk a lot about the war-connected things, which is quite understandable because we still have war in our country, or post-Maidan things, or some other things. But I think it should be something else beside of these topics, of course. But on this moment, I can say that most of the project is connected with the war or post-traumatic syndrome and so on. So we faced with a lot of the problems, but with the last 5 years, Ukrainian films is quite widely spread through the, for example, European festivals like, I don't know, Cannes or Venice or Berlinale, and the same with the co-production markets and pitching forums. And people all of us just trying to learn as much as we can how to present the project, how to prepare the project, how to make the financial plan, or how to make some other documents. So we are learning at the moment, and of course we try to do our best, and of course we will try for Ukraine it's quite important source of the money, because the competition is growing dramatically. I mean, we now have the pitching session of Ukrainian Film State Agency, and we have more than 447, I believe, projects which apply on the first row, and we have more than 300 which pass in the second row. So, and I think it's going to be like 10% of it which can be supported. So it's very, very complicated to get the money on your project, beside the fact that you can't find the money for development for the moment. So, of course, Eurimages became very important part of the financial plan for Ukrainian producers. And of course, we will try to help them as much as we can to prepare the well-developed stories for the board, for the board representatives.
Of course, Eurimages is a completion financier, and there's a long road that a project needs to go through until it even becomes eligible to apply to Eurimages. And Iole underlined that in the beginning of our talk. So yeah, I wish you that you also develop further the support mechanisms that you can offer nationally, so that together they can make the industry more sustainable, both nationally and internationally in their funding strategies. Sergio, there is an interesting question which is technical and important. So someone from the audience is asking if there could be a co-production submitted which is in partnership with a country that has not ratified the European Convention on Co-production, and they are mentioning, for instance, Belarus. And I think we all know what's happening now in Belarus, and so we give our support to the industry representatives there. So maybe you could generalize on this and tell us briefly how does it work with those countries that are not member of that are not part to the convention?
Yes. So this may get complicated in terms of collaboration between different countries, but basically the rule is that in order to apply to Eurimages, you need to have at least 2 co-production countries that are members of the fund. In addition to this, you can have co-producers from non-member states with a participation which is limited to a 30% of the financing in place. Now, this gets even more complicated when there are countries that have not ratified the convention, and then basically we apply in those cases. This is possible, but then we would need to see on a case-by-case basis, depending on the co-production structure, what kind of treaties may apply, and ultimately there would be the rules of Eurimages that would apply in the absence of a treaty.
Okay.
So I don't know.
And maybe this, yeah, I think it's a practical question which you could, I think Vladimir could always kind of test with the team of Eurimages should this become a case in real life as a project as such. But I'm wondering, maybe before we go towards the closing of this panel, maybe explain us a little bit how come there are Canada and Argentina associated to Eurimages right now. I know it's been part of internationalization, so to say, opening up the borders. Iole's been part of these active discussions as well. And I'm wondering, just tell us briefly how come, and then whether it is really working or not.
Should I answer, or Iole, you
yes.
prefer to speak? Yes. Okay.
Go ahead.
So very briefly, Eurimages, as I mentioned, started with 12 member countries. It expanded quite rapidly all over Europe. Now there are 39 member countries from Europe that are part of Eurimages. Pretty much, there is one exception, which is the UK. And apart from the UK, all the other big territories, big countries from the Council of Europe are now Eurimages members. So then there are smaller countries like Malta with smaller film industries that are not part of the fund. But this is really, except for that, Eurimages now covers all of Europe, mostly. A few years ago, we started realizing that there were countries outside of Europe that were collaborating frequently with European co-producers. And they came to Eurimages, they applied, and of course, because of the rule that I just mentioned, that the participation of non-Eurimages countries is limited to a maximum of 30% of the financing, this led to sometimes complications or limitations. So once again, trying to adapt to the film industry, it was decided to enlarge Eurimages beyond the Council of Europe, beyond Europe, and basically any country outside of Europe now that wants to join Eurimages can go through a process, through an application, and could eventually become a member of Eurimages. So the first country who decided to apply was Canada. Canada was a natural partner, mainly through their French-speaking region, but of course there is also now a collaboration that is increasing, and they were the first ones to join the fund. The second country to join the fund has been now Argentina. Argentina is also a very frequent co-producer of many European films, and there is a large tradition of collaboration. And so far, well, this is it's a relatively recent initiative because Canada joined 4 years ago and Argentina last year. So we have to see the results, but I think that the results are positive. In terms of the fund, because the fund is expanding. And in terms of the countries that have joined the fund, well, I think that the advantages for producers are clear. Basically, they have access to new financing. They have access to a possibility of co-productions. And I think Iole also mentioned that it is important. I mean, the Eurimages label is important not only for the financing, but also for the label, for what it represents. And there is an interesting study that I always like to mention, that's conducted by the European Audiovisual Observatory, that stated that international co-productions have 3 times more circulation than domestic productions. So I think that's something to take into account. When you co-produce internationally, this obviously has more complications. You need to develop a network. You need to develop a trust with your international co-producing partners. But the results are much better, not only because you are opening new markets in your co-producing countries, but also in the rest of the world. Your film will have a stronger circulation potential, for sure.
Iole, are you enjoying content coming from Canada and Argentina in various forms of co-productions now as a board member?
Of course I do, and I think this decision was just a natural evolution for the fund. I will quote what Roberto Olla, the Eurimages director, always said, that the fund is there to cater for the industry. So we follow their industry in their needs, in their demands, in particular in their aspirations. And as Sergio has mentioned, Canada and Argentina were already our partners, even before, partners of European co-productions, even before they joined Eurimages. So it was just a natural evolution to have them as part of the group. I think somehow this is also, at a more political level, it's also a way for the Council of Europe to somehow export the European way to filmmaking. And it's not just a matter of the identity of every individual country. It's not even a matter of identity of Europe, but it's the value we give to filmmaking as part of our culture, which is shared by other countries that are not in Europe. And so we're very happy to be a larger group and include them.
For me, this is the best way to start concluding our talk. The main idea was to have a natural and open and practical exchange. And thanks to your openness, all 3 of you, I'm quite confident we have managed it. You've been speaking really with open heart to share what's possible with our colleagues from Ukraine, but not only. And I would also like to finish on the content side of this discussion on the last words of Sergio and Iole, and this is about opening up and being inclusive in collaboration. It does not only refer to Canada and Argentina, but I think in 2020, when to my regret, and this is my personal opinion, the border closure has become something very much vivid still, and the dialogues and conversations about European, non-European, which country opens up and which not, somehow is still in the air. Of course, for the issue of the health, for the issue of security, but we are all adult people and we know sometimes things can become political. So I think that is the great moment when culture can prevail again. International collaboration can bring the people of various backgrounds, of different diversities together, and that is what we have to preserve. And I really believe that this is what we all need to fight for as well. So no border closing in creative collaboration, but opening up as much as possible when it is natural. I thank you very much for your time. I know in this virtual world we have become very picky with all those panels and online conversations. On behalf of the festival, I thank you for taking your time and sharing your knowledge. And there is one more person that I would like to thank who is not visible here. It's Olga from the festival, who is literally there translating for me all the questions and sending it to me on different gadgets around this so-called office that I sit in. Thank you, Olga, very much. I think we made it somehow. Yeah, the only thing I can say is that in 2021, the team of the festival is ready to expand this invitation for a real trip to Odessa, so that you can see what a really strong and fun place it is to be in summer. Thanks for being here with us, and I carry on now in 30 minutes for the next panel. And thanks for opening it up for me in a very cozy way.
Thank you. Thank you.